We've all heard the swashbuckling tales of the great explorers like Marco Polo, Christopher Columbus, Francis Drake, and Vasco da Gama. But the great explorers of the 15th and 16th century were not thrill-seeking adventurers who dreamed of discovery. They were hard-nosed businessmen who dreamed of riches and were willing to risk everything to make their golden dreams come true. By the 16th century, the fabled Silk Road, a trading route that ran from China through what is now Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Afghanistan into the Middle East and onto Europe, had been bustling with trade caravans for over a millennia. European traders went east with X, Y, and Z and brought back silks, gold, gemstones, and the most lucrative commodity of all, spice. Today, nearly every kitchen pantry in the Western world contains spices such as cinnamon, nutmeg, and pepper. But in the 16th century, these spices were extremely expensive luxuries, and those who controlled the trade in spice became exceedingly wealthy. Middle Eastern traders bought spice cheaply in the East and sold it to European traders for many times more. Then, in turn, those European traders sold it to their customers for many times more again. This trade was strictly controlled, and the amount of markup that each link in the chain added to the goods as they made their way to customers in Europe were closely guarded secrets. When early European traders finally discovered what the prices were on the other side of the world at the source, they were flabbergasted. In India during the 15th century, the local price of pepper was 3 ducats per quintal. A ducat was a gold coin that weighed about an ounce and was the dominant currency at that time. A quintal was a unit of weight that was approximately 125 pounds. In today's currency, that would be like buying 125 pounds of pepper in Calcutta for $4,000 and then selling it in Venice for $120,000. That's a markup of over 3,200%. Trade in nutmeg was even more lucrative. 1 quintal of nutmeg purchased for the same $4,000 would sell for an astonishing $2.1 million in London or Paris. Today, if you look at the same amount of cocaine, 1 quintal, 125 pounds, you would pay about $125,000 for it at the source and could sell it wholesale in New York for $1.7 million. While this is a staggering profit, it is only a markup of about 1,300%. That is 3 times less profit than a typical nutmeg dealer in the 15th century. Spice was the drug of choice during the Middle Ages. With that much potential for profit, it is easy to understand why the spice sources were so jealously guarded and why those in control of the spice trade wanted to stay in control at any cost. The Italians, particularly the Duchy of Venice, thrived off the trade that moved overland from the Far East and India. Goods passed through the hands of Venetian traders before being distributed to the rest of Europe. Banking, accounting, and mathematics flourished in this trading environment, and the wealth of Venice during the 15th century was legendary throughout Europe. Many were envious. Spain and Portugal even went to war with Italy to try to break their monopoly. They failed. While kingdoms fought for control of this trade, early entrepreneur explorers began pitching the idea of finding alternate routes to the spice islands of India and the Far East. They wanted to cut out the middlemen in Italy and the Middle East and go straight to the source. Christopher Columbus was just one of many who tried to get financial backing for an attempt to find an alternate route to the fabled Indies. He was turned down by Italy, Spain, and Portugal. Eventually, Bartholomew Diaz from Portugal was swept around the Cape of Good Hope by a storm, and the fabulous East lay before him. When Diaz returned from his voyage to Lisbon in 1488 with the news that Portugal was about to capture the spice trade at its source, Spain suddenly found itself being squeezed out of the most lucrative business in the world. So the Spanish monarchs, Isabel and Ferdinand, quickly reconsidered the Columbus proposal. And 4 years later, in 1492, Columbus sailed west to find what he and Spain hoped would be a third and perhaps even more direct route to the spice lands. However, instead of reaching the Indies, Columbus discovered the Americas, and Spain embarked on a project of conquest and exploitation that ultimately rivaled the profits of the spice trade. But that's a story for another time. By 1510, Portugal had command of every link in the spice chain from cultivation to sale in Lisbon, and by the end of the century, the profits from this trade would account for half the Portuguese government income. The rest of Europe, particularly in the north, was profoundly jealous of the Portuguese spice trade and the Spanish discoveries in the Americas. They wanted their own piece of the pie. To get it, they needed to discover what other valuable commodities might be out there in the world. The result was an extraordinary rejuvenation in the whole idea of exploration and discovery that affected all areas of life, but in particular the sciences, engineering, and navigation, and greatly expanded 16th century man's knowledge of the world. Imagine the possibilities that might present themselves if a commodity of similar magnitude to spices in the 16th century were discovered today on some remote moon of Jupiter. A renewed and exciting vigor would be injected into space exploration, and who knows where that would lead. He who dares, wins.